All right. Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 in our Road Less Traveled series. We are live in the Pinnacle studio again. And I don't know what happened to that live audience, but they just kind of...
They're here.
I had to say something for them to applaud, but that's okay. Maybe next time we'll get it on cue, because we're a professional show and that's how we do things. But anyways, it's been 2 weeks. Hopefully we can remember everything we need to talk about, and hopefully you guys remember what we were talking about so that this makes sense.
Okay, well, I don't remember what we were talking about 100%, so I figured once we get going here, we'll get our own memories refreshed.
Right. And, well, I'm a little long in the tooth, so I don't know. You have to bear with me. So anyway, leaving off of what we were talking about last time, I think we were wanting to jump into some sets and reps, set range, rep range, kind of thinking about, maybe even how it differs in terms of the types of exercises you're using, maybe the order of operation, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we were going to head. There's more than one topic, I guess, even under a category such as sets and reps. I mean, there's a lot of things we could discuss, but one of the things I thought that might be kind of helpful to people is, and again, I like to make everybody aware that we're talking about kind of concepts for somebody who's been training maybe for a long time.
Yeah, a little bit more advanced concepts than just the beginner, because we spent probably the first 14 episodes talking about beginner stuff. So now we wanted to get into a little bit more of an advanced insight, because again, if you're following us and you've gone through episode 1 to now, maybe you're even ready for a little bit more advanced advice. But if not, then we've given you a little bit of a tool bag to work with, some tools to work with, and then we're kind of getting up a little bit, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay. With that being said, I wanted to talk maybe a little bit specifically about maybe rep ranges that are more ideal for specific body parts.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Okay, so in other words, if I'm training my back versus my legs versus my chest versus my arms, shoulders, whatever, is there an ideal rep range for each of those body parts for muscle growth? Mainly for muscle growth, not necessarily for strength specifically.
Right.
And I think that there is.
Okay.
It does vary individual to individual. So this is kind of a general statement. It may not be 100% apply to you. But what I have found over the years is that let's just start with the chest.
Okay.
To make it easy.
Sure.
I have found that on most compound movements like a bench press or an incline press, any pressing movement, usually around 6 to 8 repetitions to failure is kind of the ideal range.
Okay. And when you say failure, what do you mean?
Muscular failure, so that when you're doing rep number 6 or 7 or 8, you're not able to perform another repetition.
Right.
On your own anyway.
Well, sure.
So,
because there's concepts that can take you beyond that, so we just want to make sure that we hit that spot.
Now, when you go into a muscle group like your back, specifically your lats, it's kind of the same rep range, about 6 to 8. So if you're doing a bent over row, any kind of rows on machines, for the most part, even on like 3/4 deadlift and regular deadlift, if you're trying to do them for your back, I think that's a pretty good range on those too. But then as you get into some other muscle groups, like let's say biceps or triceps, a little smaller than the chest or the lats, I have found that higher rep range is a little better for muscle growth.
Right.
10, 12, 15.
Sure.
Okay, and there's other reasons that, not just because, there's other reasons why that's beneficial. One being in the higher reps, at least on the things like the arms, because of the you can put a lot of stress on tendons and things like that when you're doing, let's say you're trying to do 6 reps to failure with an arm curl. The bicep's not very big, probably a good chance of a tear or something.
Yeah, the wear and tear is, it can happen quicker.
Is right.
Yeah.
Shoulders, again, if you're doing more of a compound movement like a shoulder press, I think about 6 or 8, maybe upwards of 10.
Sure.
6 or 8 is probably about right to failure. But if you're doing like an isolation movement, like a side lateral or rear lateral, any kind of isolation, again, it's higher rep, 10, 12,
Sure.
something like that. Legs,
They're a different ball game.
they are. I mean, you would think that it kind of seems like the bigger the muscle, the lower the rep range.
Sure.
The chest is bigger than the biceps, and the lats are bigger than the triceps, that kind of thing. But for legs, they are about the biggest muscle group in your body for the most part. I found high reps will build muscle usually better than lower.
Right.
So, like, if you're doing barbell squats, sets of 12 to 15, even upwards of 20, they're a lot tougher than doing sets of 5 or 6. I know that. They're just physically more demanding, but your legs will usually grow better from that. Same thing like on the leg press.
Right.
Calves. I think that the trick to the calves is little rest or a very small amount of rest between sets more than high rep or low rep. I've kind of got a good result from both on that. But what I've found is that doing like a set of calves, like say you're doing 15 repetitions on a standing calf, maybe immediately or give yourself about 10 seconds or less and go right into another set or go into another movement like seated calf.
Okay.
Like
Sure.
2 or 3 sets back to back with very little rest in between.
Right.
Just, very quick. I think they respond better to that.
Right. Well,
Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, if somebody ever, asks as to how do we know this type of stuff, and, something more than just well, I've been doing this for 20 years or more, as my experience tells me, just listen to me, don't, do as I say, not as I do, or do what I say and as what I do in this situation. But you got to think about it. Be logical. Again, those smaller muscle groups like your biceps, your triceps, your forearms, they're connected to thinner, smaller tendons. They're connected to smaller joints. Therefore, the propensity to become injured is a little higher. So you want to make sure that you're not, trying to lift the same weight or do the same thing you're doing for the bigger muscle groups. Right. And then beyond that, I think it has something to do with the type of muscle that's there. With legs, you're on your feet all day. You're moving. You're walking. You're carrying your own body weight. Sometimes you're carrying other things as well on top of your body weight. So your legs have a daily grind of lots of things. So it's going to handle more. It's going to be able to have higher energy levels, higher muscular endurance, so to speak. Whereas with our shoulders, our chest, our back, we use them, but we don't use them to the same capacity. So, just be logical with it. It makes sense in terms of the rep range.
Well, yeah, and there is evidence, and I'm sure it's, the different type of muscle fiber responds to different rep ranges to failure. But there again, nobody really knows exactly on an individual person unless you did some kind of a test what kind of muscle fiber is in your legs versus, at least the percentage or whatever. So that's why I think it varies a little bit person to person.
Yeah.
And you may say, well, can I get big arms doing sets of 6 or 8? Well, I'm sure you can. I'm not saying not to do that, but I have found my arms grow better doing higher reps, my legs higher, my chest and back lower.
Sure.
Kind of just cap it off.
Right. So, now, what do you think about, rest time? Do you think that has something to do with your ability to muscle growth? And we've already discussed muscle recovery, but rest time in between sets, in between reps. Do you I know some people believe in counting 1, 2, 3, and then down 1, 2, 3, and some people believe in a certain specific set rest time.
Are you asking time between each set or the time to do a rep?
Both, like rep speed and rest time.
Okay, rep speed I think is very important. I tell everybody that I train or that that I work with that you always want to have constant tension on any muscle, any movement. So that means that the up and the down part of whatever you're doing, whether it's a squat, a bench press, an arm curl, a dip, whatever. And so the rep speed should be constant, basically. There shouldn't be any jerking. There shouldn't be any movement that is momentum aiding in the movement. And there's a couple of good reasons for this. Number one is, again, the injury prevention. And number two is the longer you can keep that muscle under tension, the better chance you have to make it grow. So in other words, if you're just on a bench press is a perfect example because most people have a tendency to kind of let that weight drop on the negative, right? They just kind of let it come down to their chest and they bounce it off, or it's a real there's no resistance on the way down. It's just
Right.
kind of let it fall.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a lot of resistance on the way up because on the positive. But if you control it on the negative and the positive, you're basically getting twice as much work out of that rep
Right.
as somebody who's only doing basically the positive, right?
Right. Right. Well, and it makes the exercise harder, and therefore we talked a little bit also before about efficiency in making the muscle tired, making it fail in a certain rep range. Again, that helps in that. If you're doing a ton of weight and you're dropping it on yourself, and you can do the weight, but it might make the difference between failing muscle failure within the rep range that you're looking for to optimum growth, and it might make the difference between going beyond that and not doing as much for yourself. So it helps to exhaust the muscle out fully.
It's injury prevention again.
Yeah,
Being a lot safer because if your weight's under control, the chances of being injured are a lot less than if you're letting something just kind of you're throwing things around.
Bouncing the weight off of you is pretty violent and pretty scary looking. I've seen some YouTube videos of that, and this isn't necessarily somebody dropping the weight on themselves, but just going down and bouncing the weight off for that extra oomph. Kind of the same thing as bouncing the weight off of the ground when doing deadlifts.
What's going on is really this, is that people that are doing that they're lifting weights.
Yeah.
They're not training.
Yeah.
There's a difference. I mean, when you're trying to train to build muscle, the exercise and the weights and the machines are just tools to stimulate muscle, to break it down.
Right.
When you're just lifting weights, you're just coming in, just moving weight from point A to point B, just because that's just what we're doing, I guess.
Right.
So,
now, if you could touch real quick on what you think about the time in between sets. You use that for just a
yeah. It depends on the muscle group. So again, if you're doing and it depends on the exercise. If you're doing something that's real stressful, if you're doing those sets of 6 on bench press or shoulder press or whatever, or a barbell row, you're just going to need a little more time between, maybe a couple of minutes or whatever. If you're doing something like arms or calves, it's very, very minimal, maybe 20, 30 seconds between sets sometimes.
Okay.
Again, it's not a golden rule. It's just kind of, I've trained at a higher pace before, at a slower pace. I can't really say 100% that one is dramatically better than the other.
Sure.
I mean, we could go and I don't have the answer for you 100%, but
right.
in general, that's really how I tell everybody to do it is
right.
Smaller muscle group, 30 seconds, something. If you're doing a heavy set of leg press for 10 reps to failure, you're not getting back under there in 30 seconds.
Sure.
You're not going to have your breath.
Sure.
You might need 4 or 5 minutes between a set, right?
Right.
But if you're taking 4 or 5 minutes between a set of tricep press downs,
right.
That may not be the most ideal.
Right. Well, and there are guidelines for whatever your goal is for sets, reps, and percent of your 1 rep max if you're going the school way, the scholastic way. But my rule of thumb was always kind of like what you're saying. For me, when I can catch my breath and I can feel my heart rate go down to a point to where I won't pass out, then I'm like, okay to go back in and do another set.
That works, I think.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, we are live here today. So if you want to reach out to us on Facebook, or if you have our number, you can text us. Or if you are on the Spreaker app, then go ahead and jump into that little chat box, and you can ask us your questions, or